Hi, welcome to As Caroline, and we're going to show you how to do the foundation paper piecing for our chocolate box block of the month subscription club. And Laura will be demonstrating as Laura designed the club.
Hello everyone, welcome to this little demonstration on how to do the foundation paper piecing. So today what we're going to do is we're going to be making a section of this block just over here, this one here, and what we'll be doing is we'll be making just one wedge. So all of the pieces that make up the chocolate box quilt are constructed in wedges, and then we put the wedges together and we may end up with this amazing foundation paper piece block. So what you will need for this are your fabrics, which are of course provided in the monthly subscription. Each block that you will be getting has 2 different Liberty prints, and then you will also be getting a section of plain to complete the outside of the blocks. You will need a rotary cutter, a ruler. The Add-A-Quarter ruler in particular is really great for foundation paper piecing, so I really recommend that one. You will need a small pair of scissors, some pins, a cutting mat, as you can see here, an ironing board, and an iron, as well as a sewing machine, of course. So to start with, the steps that I've already done, I have roughly cut out the pattern. You can see here that the edge of the pattern is this edge of the grey area here, and I have just roughly cut out the pattern so that there's a bit of white around it. What I've also done is, using the fabric key that will be in the instructions, I've used a coloured pencil to colour in what fabric goes where. This isn't necessary, but it definitely helps speed up your piecing. It's nice to know at a glance, when you're looking at the pattern and working, what fabric is going next, rather than referring back to the key. So this dark section here is for this fabric here, my dark purple Glenjade, and this lighter colour here is for my fabric B, which is this Edenham here. So looking at the pattern, what we will be looking for to start with is the area marked as section 1. So here, that's this section here. So section 1. Using the fabric key, identify the fabric that section 1 is. So section 1 is fabric B, which is this Edenham here. Again, every block will be different though, but this one is these colours in particular. And what we want to do is you want to lay your piece of fabric down, wrong side facing up. So that's the right side of the fabric. You can see it's a lot more bolder and colourful. Wrong side facing up here. What we'll then do is, you can see this section here named line 1, this line here. We will fold line 1 over towards you. It's called a mountain fold in origami. So we've creased the entire section of line 1 here. So keep that folded down, and working in the top left-hand side of your fabric to begin with, you want to position that folded edge about 1/4 inch away from the edge of the fabric here. This will become your seam allowance. So if I unfold this to about 90 degrees, what you can see is that the entirety of section 1 here is being covered by this fabric here. If I position it here, then this whole section isn't going to be covered with fabric, so that's not a good place to put it. So put it inside. You want to be able to see. If you're new to FPP, it'd be really handy if you could see outside of the perimeter of your section 1 that you're trying to fill. If you can see that the fabric you've just put down covers at least 1/4 inch around, then that would be great. Sorry, extends 1/4 inch around, that's fantastic. So I'm happy with that placement. I've got that about 1/4 inch away from that fold. I'm going to pin this in place. Okay, now we're on to adding our second fabric. So if we look at the next section, section 2, it always goes sequentially. We want fabric A, which we already know is this beautiful purple Glenjade. What you want to do with this one, move this aside, identify the right side of the fabric, which is that one there. you want to put it down on the surface, right side facing up. And then taking your pin together piece here, align this, the line 1 edge, you want to align this 1/4 inch with a straight edge on your section 2 fabric, which is that Glen Jade, as you already know. So we've matched those perfectly. That's great. And what we're trying to achieve here is we're trying to make sure that this fabric that's put on the bottom completely covers this section 2. But in order to do that, you have to fold this down. So this step is really handy if you have a light box, or if you hold it up to a window, or even if you put your work onto a tablet computer that's on a blank white bright screen. That will really help you see through the paper. The paper that I'm using for this demonstration here is normal printer paper. It's thick, but the paper you'll be getting in your kit is thinner, so it'll be much easier to see the printed lines through the underside of the paper. So it may not be showing very well on the camera right now, but I promise you'll have a much easier time seeing the lines through. What I've just done there, because I can't see through the fabric, through the paper quite as well, is I've put a crease through the second line. This just defines the boundaries of section 2. So what you can see is that this folded down section is section 2, and that's my section 2 fabric. We just want the section 2 fabric, which is on the bottom, to completely cover and extend around the borders of that section 2 area, which it does here. We can see that. If it fits when it's folded down, it'll fit when it's flipped out and open. Because just like normal sewing, with foundation paper piecing, we are sewing fabrics right sides together, and then we will unfold them so they're both showing the right sides, just like with normal sewing. So I'm happy with that placement. I'm going to pin that in place through all the layers, but I'm unfolding this paper back because I'm getting ready to sew. So we'll move over to the sewing machine. On my sewing machine, I've set the stitch length to about 1.5. I wouldn't go any lower than that. It helps perforate the paper and makes it easier to remove the paper eventually when you do get to it. Not that that'll be happening for a long time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be sewing and tracing directly over this line 1. You want to start and end your stitches a little bit before and after line 1. So I'm going to start about here. So putting it under the foot. I'm going to be tracing line 1 exactly. One stitch beyond. If you can trace, you can foundation paper piece. It's much harder to go wrong because we've got lines to follow. So as you can see there, I've started a little bit before and ended a little bit after that line 1, and I've traced line 1 exactly. So let's trace line 1 exactly just there. So let's unpin and move over to the ironing board. What you want to do is you want to unfold those fabrics so that they're stretched out on either side of that sewn line. You can see my paper on the back is flat. Let's press along that line 1. And this is what it will look like from the front, just like as you can see here on the finished pattern here. So we will flip this back over and put it on the cutting board. What I'm going to be doing next is trimming this fabric down. Because the way we are sewing this, we're using big pieces of fabric, but we're only using them for small sections at a time, so you will need to be cutting each time. So I'm just going to roughly cut that there. There we go, that's completely fine. it extends outward from the edge of this grey area, so we can be reassured that that entire section 1 is covered. Let's do the same for section 2, except we won't be cutting it quite as roughly. What we'll do is we'll fold back the paper along line 2, fold towards you, so that the whole of line 2 is creased. And we'll keep that folded down. Now what you want to do is you'll grab your add a quarter ruler, which has this really handy lip which catches against the folded piece of paper. The lip on there is 1/4 inch wide, so you've got accurate seam allowance every time. So we'll just cut along there and move that away. So what we've just done, as with that first step when we first laid our folded line 1 down, we are now giving ourselves 1/4 inch, which is our new seam allowance. Looking at the front, you can see that section 2 is about there and section 1 is about there. It's all completely covered, so that is fine. I'll give it another press. Got to press between every step. We'll come back over here and fold down the whole of the paper along line 2. First, before I do that, I should have shown you the next section. So the next section we're going to be adding is section 3. We've just done section 2, so we'll add section 3, and this is background fabric. So that will be your white that you were given in the kit. So fold down line 2 and position this 1/4 inch cut line, the seam allowance, which you've just done before, with a straight edge on the white. Now the entirety of this section needs to be white. So when it's folded down, you want to move it along until it's all covered. See here, this area isn't covered by the white, so keep moving it along, there we go, until it's comfortably being covered by the white. If it covers a section when it's folded down, it'll cover it when it's unfolded. So let's pin that in place. So we're happy with that being matched. Okay, and we're going to go to the sewing machine and sew along line 2 exactly, just as before. Starting a little bit before, tracing exactly, a little bit afterwards. We can unpin those sections, trim the loose threads down. Okay, so just as before, we've traced that line 2 exactly. And let's take it over to the ironing board again, and we'll flip these out. We'll give this a press along the line that we've just sewn, and then move it back over to the cutting board with the paper side facing up. So what we'll do now is we will roughly cut again on the outside here. We'll trim it more accurately in a second. You'll probably need a sharper rotary cutter than what I'm using right now. All right, so that is our roughly cut block. We'll give it another press just to be safe. Okay, so you can see here that the fabric entirely covers the required areas here. There's no gaps, it's all fine. So what we're going to do now is we're going to trim the block down to the correct size. We'll be following this grey line here. So this grey section is your seam allowance area, and you want to trim the block to the edge of this grey line. This black line here is your sew line. We'll be doing that one in a second. So let's trim the grey line. It's really handy having a light source in front of you. this step. And I like to check that I've cut through everything before I move the ruler. That's great. So we'll do the same, making sure everything, all the fabric is nice and flat and not bunching up under itself. We'll do the same on this side. Yep, it's all good. And the same here. Okay, the last thing you want to do, the grey area here doesn't come to a complete point. We've shaved it off a little bit so to help reduce the seam allowance bulk. So just follow the grey line and trim those corners in the same way. Right, and that is your complete block. So what you do is you'll make 7 more of those.
Time to eat some chocolate.
I know. Well deserved break time. Feel free to consume the chocolate at your leisure. In the meantime, I have miraculously made 7 more. So they're all done using the same technique. It really is simple. So then this is the, I mean, it's all fun, but this is the super fun part. So we'll take 2 opposite wedges. They're going to come together to make a square, like that. So we'll align them fabric side to fabric side. And what I'm going to do with this is, rather than aligning them grey edge to grey edge, just in case I've made any mistakes in trimming, because ruler slip does happen unfortunately, I'm going to align them sew line to sew line, so with that black line there, and I'm going to start from the middle. So what I'm doing here is I'm peeling back the seam allowance and checking to see that meeting point where the white and the coloured fabrics meet. It's important to start aligning at this point first, because if it's off, it's going to be really obvious at this point. If the middles are off where all the coloured fabrics meet, you could probably get away with that a little bit more. It's much busier and harder to see. But where the colour and the white meets, that's going to be obvious. So you can see there that about 1/4 inch in, I fold that down, that meets perfectly in this section here. So I am happy with that. I'll pin that in place. Next I'll do the middle section where the colours are. So again, I'm going to be concentrating on aligning this sew line, not so much the edge of the fabric. So I've let them naturally come together. I'm just going to see how accurate that is. So put a pin through the very edge. Ooh, that's pretty good. The pin's not quite on the edge there, but it is on the line. That's pretty good. I'm happy with that. So I'm going to pin that. And I'm going to do the same with this. Let's put a pin here to see how close it is. Oops, slightly off. Just adjust ever so slightly. There we go, that's much better. And pin that in place. Now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we'll be sewing along this line, that black line there, tracing it exactly. We will start off the block and finish off the block. So you want to sew this section as well. So let's give that a go. Okay. Pulling out the pins as we go, of course. You want to trace it as much as you can. Right, So I've started and ended off that line, so we've sewn directly on there. If you check on the back, you can see how accurate I've been. So that's okay. All right, now the fun part. We get to see the points meeting. Ta-da! Look at that! Yay! That's exciting. I find it really hard to achieve those sorts of points. And you can see, look in the middle there. Yay! With any other techniques, it really is great. Okay, I'm happy with that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to rip away the seam allowance along the line that diagonal line that we've just sewn, the diagonal of the triangle rather. I'm going to rip that away on both sides. This helps reduce the bulk. Okay, and now we're going to take that over to the ironing board and press those seams open, also to help reduce bulk. Some people who FPP prefer using a presser, like a wooden presser tool, or even their finger. That's completely fine, it's up to you. I just happen to like an iron, especially in winter. All right, so that is that section of the block done. And you'll repeat that 3 more times, so you have 4 squares that then get joined together to make the entire block. And then of course your borders will get sewn on, these beautiful Capel Navy borders, and then the white triangles there. And then in the final month, we'll be doing this sashiko style quilting, hand quilting, to decorate the chocolates. That'll be really easy to do as well. Because FPP is a technique that can give you such accurate points, it would be heartbreaking if your hand quilting wasn't quite as accurate. So don't fret, don't fret. These lines here on the pattern, you'll be able to trace them. So when you hold this pattern up to a window, you'll be able to see the lines that indicate the hand quilting exactly. You can trace those and then use those traced lines to just to hand quilt. So you can end up with perfectly even hand quilting. So I hope that's good news. And that is all there is to the technique really, and you'll be able to make all of these pretty blocks using that simple technique. It's simple and repetitive, and I do hope you enjoy it. Thank you so much. Bye!
Thank you, Laura.